Hello and welcome back to What Is, where we dive headfirst into the fascinating, the complex, and sometimes the downright mind-bending concepts that shape our world. Today we're not just talking about the theory, we're talking about a phenomenon that has inspired countless movies, freaked out meteorologists, and probably made you second guess whether to hit snooze this morning. We are, of course, talking about the one, the only, the legendary butterfly effect. You've heard the phrase, right? A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and it causes a tornado in Texas. It sounds poetic. It sounds dramatic. But what is it really? Is it just a cool movie trope? Or is there actually some science lurking behind the poetry? And perhaps more importantly, is it real? Stick around because we're going to untangle the science, the fiction, and the hilarious mishaps that a tiny flutter might, or might not, cause. What it is. At its core, the butterfly effect is all about something scientists call sensitive dependence on initial conditions. Now, don't let that jargon scare you off. It simply means that within a chaotic system, a very small change in the beginning can lead to a vastly different outcome later on. And we'll get to what chaotic really means in a minute. We're talking about a chain reaction where the tiniest tweak can send ripples through the entire system, growing exponentially until the end result is completely unrecognizable from what it might have been. Think of it like this. Imagine you're playing billiards. You line up your shot perfectly, aiming for the 8-ball. As you strike, a microscopic piece of dust on the table slightly defects the cue ball. We're talking about nanometers here, something you couldn't even see. That tiny, almost imperceivable deviation, compounded by all the subsequent collisions, means the balls don't go where you intended. The 8-ball misses the pocket, the cue ball bounces off 3 cushions, and suddenly your perfectly planned shot is a total mess. The butterfly effect isn't about direct causation in a linear sense. It's not saying this flap causes that tornado. It's saying that the flap, or any other tiny, seemingly insignificant disturbance, represents a change in the initial conditions of a massively complex, interconnected system. And when that system is chaotic, even the most minute alteration can steer it down an entirely different path. The key here is unpredictability. We're not talking about predicting that a specific flap will cause a specific hurricane. We're talking about the inherent inability to predict the long-term future of a chaotic system because you can never know its initial state with absolute perfect precision. There's always some tiny bit of information missing, some microscopic variable you haven't accounted for. And that missing piece? That's where the butterfly's wings, or the speck of dust, come in. They represent that initial, immeasurable nudge that can send everything spiraling off into a completely different future. It's both fascinating and, if you're a control freak, a little bit terrifying. Because it implies that perfect prediction, even with all the supercomputers in the world, might just be fundamentally impossible for certain types of systems. But hey, it keeps things interesting, right? Development. So where did this idea come from? Was it a philosopher pondering the cosmic dance? Or a poet lost in thought? Nope. It came from a meteorologist, a brilliant scientist named Edward Lorenz, back in the early 1960s. And the story of its discovery is, ironically, a perfect example of the effect itself. Lorenz was a professor at MIT working on atmospheric modeling. He was trying to predict the weather, a notoriously tricky business. He developed a set of 12 nonlinear equations to simulate weather patterns on an early computer. One day in 1961, he decided to rerun the simulation to examine a specific sequence of weather in more detail. To save time, instead of starting the entire sequence from scratch, he entered the numbers from an earlier printout about halfway through the simulation. Here's where the magic happens, or rather, the chaos. The original program stored numbers with 6 decimal places, like 0.506127, but his printouts, to save space, truncated these numbers to 3 decimal places, like 0.506. Lorenz, thinking this tiny, almost imperceivable rounding difference wouldn't matter, confidently typed in the shorter numbers and went away to grab a cup of coffee, expecting to see a very similar weather pattern emerge when he returned. When he did return, much to his astonishment, the new weather pattern had completely diverged from the original. At first, the 2 simulations looked identical. Then, as time progressed in the model, they started to drift apart, slowly, subtly, until after a few simulated months, they bore absolutely no resemblance to each other whatsoever. The slight difference in the initial data, those 3 missing decimal places, had created a totally new weather forecast. This wasn't a bug. This was a revelation. Lorenz realized that even the smallest, most insignificant changes in the initial conditions could lead to drastically different long-term outcomes in complex systems like the atmosphere. He published his findings in a groundbreaking paper titled Deterministic Non-Periodic Flow in 1963, essentially founding the field of chaos theory. And later, while preparing a presentation for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, he coined that now famous phrase, "Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas?" And just like that, a scientific principle was born, named after a whimsical metaphor that perfectly captured its profound implications. Lorenz's work showed us that the world isn't always a predictable, clockwork mechanism. Sometimes it's a wonderfully, terrifyingly chaotic dance where even a whisper can start an avalanche. Use in pop culture. It didn't take long for such a compelling and dramatic concept to flutter its way out of scientific journals and into the heart of popular culture. The butterfly effect just sounds cinematic, doesn't it? It's a goldmine for storytelling, exploring themes of destiny, choice, and the terrifying power of even the smallest actions. Perhaps one of the most famous early nods came from the king of chaos himself, Jeff Goldblum, as Dr. Ian Malcolm in the original Jurassic Park. He famously demonstrated chaos theory by dropping water onto his hand, showing how a tiny change in the initial drip leads to an unpredictable path of the water. He then warns against the unpredictable nature of an island full of genetically engineered dinosaurs, famously proclaiming, "Life finds a way, and boy, did it ever find a way to eat people." Then there's the movie that literally bears the name, 2004's The Butterfly Effect, starring Ashton Kutcher. Here the concept is taken to its most extreme and literal interpretation. Kutcher's character has the ability to travel back in time to pivotal moments in his past and change a single, seemingly minor decision. Every alteration, no matter how small or well-intentioned, catastrophically rewrites his present, often leading to far worse, darker realities. It's a fascinating, if grim, exploration of the idea that some things are maybe best left alone, and that trying to control chaos can sometimes just make it angrier. But the idea predates a direct movie title. Think about films like Run, Lola, Run from Germany. We see 3 different scenarios play out for the protagonist Lola as she races against the clock to save her boyfriend. Each scenario is triggered by the most minor of initial differences, a slightly different pace, a misconnection, a split-second decision, each leading to wildly diverging conclusions. It's a masterclass in demonstrating how a fraction of a second can completely alter a person's fate. The film Sliding Doors explores parallel realities stemming from a tiny moment. Does Gwyneth Paltrow's character catch her train or miss it? That one instant splinters her life into 2 distinct timelines, each with different relationships, careers, and consequences. The film beautifully illustrates how seemingly inconsequential events can fundamentally reshape an entire existence. Even in television, shows like Lost played with elements of this, particularly with the Dharma Initiative's attempt to correct or alter events, only to often find themselves creating the very outcomes they were trying to prevent. It's the inherent irony of the butterfly effect. The more you try and control the chaotic system, the more you might inadvertently contribute to its unpredictability. Pop culture loves the butterfly effect because it taps into a fundamental human anxiety and wonder. Do my choices matter? How much impact do I really have? And what if that tiny thing I did or didn't do changed everything? It's a powerful narrative tool, reminding us that sometimes the smallest flutter can indeed feel like a seismic shift. Real-world implications. So the butterfly effect is great for a good movie plot, but does it actually, matter in the real world outside of a professor's computer simulation? Absolutely. The implications of sensitive dependence on initial conditions ripple through countless aspects of our lives, from the grand scale of global systems to the minutiae of our daily routines. Let's start where it all began, weather forecasting. This is perhaps the most direct and impactful real-world application. Edward Lorenz's discovery fundamentally changed how meteorologists approach their work. It explained why long-range forecasts are so incredibly unreliable. Even with the most sophisticated supercomputers and vast networks of sensors, we still can never measure the atmosphere's precise state down to every last molecule, every microscopic air current, every infinitesimal temperature fluctuation. Those tiny unmeasured variables are the butterflies, and their cumulative effect means that beyond about 7 to 10 days, weather predictions become highly speculative, if not outright educated guesses. It's not that the models are bad, it's that the system itself is inherently chaotic. Consider climate change. This is a macro-scale example, where seemingly small human actions like releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere over decades have triggered massive, complex, and unpredictable changes in global systems. A fraction of a degree increase in global temperature might seem insignificant, but its effect on ice caps, ocean currents, weather patterns, and ecosystems is profound and far-reaching, demonstrating a terrifying large-scale butterfly effect in action. Economics and financial markets are another prime example. They are incredibly complex, interconnected, chaotic systems driven by countless individual decisions, algorithms, and unforeseen events. A seemingly minor piece of news, a shift in investor sentiment, a small policy change, or even a single rogue trade can trigger a cascade of reactions that lead to market volatility, recessions, or even global financial crises. The 2008 financial crisis, for instance, involved the complex interplay of seemingly minor decisions and risk factors that spiraled into a global catastrophe. In ecology and biology, the introduction of an invasive species or the removal of a single keystone species from an ecosystem can have devastating and unpredictable ripple effects throughout the entire food web and habitat. Who knew that a few dozen zebra mussels brought over in ship ballast could wreak such havoc on an entire freshwater ecosystem? It's a slow-motion butterfly effect playing out over years and decades. Even in our personal lives, the concept resonates. Think about those what-if moments. What if I hadn't taken that specific job? What if I turned left instead of right? What if I'd responded to that email 5 minutes earlier? Small decisions, chance encounters, or even just being in the right or wrong place at the right time can alter the entire trajectory of our careers, relationships, and even our entire lives. Sometimes the butterfly flapping its wings is you, deciding on what to wear this morning. You just don't know what hurricane it might inadvertently conjure, or just a slight drizzle. The butterfly effect reminds us that we live in a world of profound interconnectedness, and an inherent unpredictability. It's a humbling thought, suggesting that while we can influence events, absolute control or perfect foresight over complex systems remains a tantalizing yet elusive dream. Is it real? So after all this, the million-dollar question, is the butterfly effect real? The short answer is yes, absolutely. As a principle of chaos theory, the idea of sensitive dependence on initial conditions in nonlinear chaotic systems is definitely real and well established in scientific fields like meteorology, fluid dynamics, and cosmology. However, and this is crucial, it's not real in the way Hollywood often portrays it. A single butterfly flapping its wings does not directly cause a tornado in a cause and effect linear domino chain kind of way. It's not about deterministic prediction based on one tiny event. Instead, that butterfly's wing flap represents an immeasurable, infinitesimal permutation in the atmosphere. It's one of countless, unknowable tiny variables that make it impossible for us to ever perfectly know the initial state of the weather system. Because we can't know that state perfectly, we can't predict its long-term future with absolute certainty. Any tiny, unmeasured difference, a butterfly, a dust mote, a rounding error in a computer model, will over time lead to a completely different outcome than if that difference hadn't existed. It's less about the butterfly being the cause of the tornado, and more about the butterfly illustrating the impossibility of perfect prediction in a chaotic system. It highlights the inherent limits on our ability to forecast the future of complex systems. So while you don't need to feel personally responsible for a hurricane every time you swat a mosquito, the underlying mathematical and scientific principle that inspired the metaphor is indeed a fundamental aspect of how our universe operates. Small things can, and do, produce large, unpredictable consequences. It's an elegant, sometimes frustrating, and utterly fascinating truth about the universe we inhabit. And that, my friends, is the beautiful, chaotic reality of the butterfly effect. From a professor's accidental rounding error to Hollywood's most dramatic time travel scenarios, the butterfly effect captures our imagination because it speaks to a profound truth. Our world is not a perfectly ordered machine. It's a dynamic, interconnected dance where even the tiniest step can alter the entire choreography. It's an idea that reminds us that while we can't control everything, every action, every choice, no matter how small, becomes part of that vast, unpredictable tapestry. So go forth, make your tiny changes, flap your metaphorical wings, and see what wonderful or wildly unexpected breezes you create. If you found this dive into chaos theory and fluttering wings as fascinating as we did, please do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to What Is for more explorations into the wonderfully weird, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive. And in the comments below, let us know what tiny decision you made that ended up having a huge impact on your life. We'd love to hear your personal butterfly effect stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.